The summer was winding down in the small town of Maplewood. The air carried the faint scent of blooming wildflowers, mingled with the earthy tones of freshly mown grass. 13-year-old Liam Harper loved these late afternoons, filled with golden sunlight and the promise of carefree adventures before school began again. But this particular day, his life took an unexpected turn. It started with the sound of the old wooden gate creaking open next door. Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker, an elderly woman in her late 70s, was struggling to bring out a large bag of garden clippings. Her small, wiry frame and the stoop in her back made the task seem monumental. Liam had always noticed her. She lived alone in the big Victorian house next door. Most of the kids in the neighborhood considered her mysterious and kept their distance, whispering tales of secret treasures and old secrets behind her overgrown hedges. But Liam never believed the stories. Spotting her struggle, he called out, "Need a hand with that." Mrs. Whitaker glanced up, startled, but her expression softened when she saw the boy. "Oh, Liam dear, I'd hate to trouble you." "It's no trouble," he said, jogging over. "It's just a bag." From that moment, their relationship began. Mrs. Whitaker invited Liam in for tea as thanks. Her house was a treasure trove of antiques, with bookshelves groaning under the weight of leather-bound novels, cabinets filled with delicate china, and old photographs that whispered of a bygone era. The smell of lavender and old wood hung in the air. Over time, Liam found himself spending more afternoons helping her with odd jobs, mowing the lawn, fixing loose shutters, or carrying groceries. She taught him how to prune roses and bake scones, and in return, he told her stories about his favorite superhero comics and soccer matches. Mrs. Whitaker had no family nearby, and Liam's parents were often busy with work, leaving him plenty of time to spend with her. She always insisted on giving him a few dollars for his help, though he usually tried to refuse. "Save it for something that sparks joy," she would say with a smile. One day, as they sat in her cozy living room, she showed him an old wooden jewelry box. Inside were small trinkets, a few faded photographs, and a stack of yellowed letters tied with a ribbon. Her fingers lingered over the letters. "These are from my late husband," she said softly. "He was my greatest adventure." Liam listened intently as she shared stories about her youth, her travels to Europe, her time working as a librarian, and the way her husband had proposed during a thunderstorm. It struck Liam how vibrant her life had been, even though she now lived quietly. As weeks turned into months, Liam became like family to her. He found joy in their conversations and the little ways he could make her days brighter. She, in turn, often encouraged him to dream big and explore his talents. "The world is full of surprises for those who are willing to embrace them," she'd say. But one autumn morning, Liam noticed the curtains of her house remained drawn. Concerned, he knocked on her door, only to be greeted by silence. Later that day, he learned from his parents that Mrs. Whitaker had passed away peacefully in her sleep. Liam felt a wave of sadness wash over him. Though they had been neighbors for only a few years, their bond had grown deep. The next week, after her funeral, he received an unexpected call. The executor of her estate wanted to speak with him. When Liam and his parents arrived at the lawyer's office, they were greeted with a warm smile. The lawyer explained that Mrs. Whitaker had included Liam in her will. "To Liam Harper," the lawyer read aloud, "I leave a sum of $1,000 and the contents of the attic in my home. I hope these gifts remind him of the joy he brought into my life and inspire him to pursue his dreams." Liam was stunned. His parents exchanged surprised looks, but the lawyer continued. "The attic contains items Mrs. Whitaker wished for you to have. They may seem ordinary, but she believed they held meaning." Curious and touched, Liam went to her house to explore the attic. Dust motes danced in the sunlight as he climbed the creaky stairs. The attic was cluttered with boxes, trunks, and a small desk covered with envelopes. Among the treasures, he found an old typewriter, a set of watercolor paints, and a collection of books on creativity and entrepreneurship. One box contained old maps marked with notes in Mrs. Whitaker's handwriting, as well as postcards from around the world. As he sifted through the items, he discovered a letter addressed to him. In it, Mrs. Whitaker had written, "Dear Liam, you have a kind heart and an adventurous spirit. These items fueled my dreams once, and I hope they will do the same for you. Use them wisely, and never stop exploring the possibilities of life." Liam's heart swelled. He couldn't yet grasp how these items would shape his future, but he knew one thing for certain: Mrs. Whitaker had given him more than material possessions. She had given him a belief in himself and the courage to dream. As Liam spent more time sifting through the treasures Mrs. Whitaker had left him, the attic began to feel less like a storage space and more like a treasure trove of wisdom and inspiration. Each item seemed to carry a whisper of her encouragement, nudging him toward possibilities he hadn't considered before. He began with the typewriter, a vintage machine with ivory keys that clacked melodiously. Though it took some time to figure out how it worked, he soon found himself typing out stories' adventures inspired by the maps and postcards Miss Whitaker had left behind. His stories were simple at first: a boy exploring lost cities, discovering hidden treasures, or finding companionship in the most unexpected places. But as he wrote, Liam felt a spark ignite within him. Writing was a way to honor Mrs. Whitaker's legacy, to keep her memory alive. His stories became more intricate, and before long he started sharing them with his friends at school. One of his teachers, Ms. Delgado, noticed his growing passion for storytelling. After reading a short story Liam had written, she encouraged him to enter a local youth writing competition. The winner would receive a scholarship of $1,000 for creative pursuits. Liam hesitated. "What if my story isn't good enough?" he asked her one afternoon. Miss Delgado smiled. "Every writer feels that way. But remember, storytelling isn't about perfection. It's about sharing a part of yourself. You've got a gift, Liam. Don't let fear hold you back." Taking her words to heart, Liam submitted a story titled The Compass of Wonders. It was about a boy who inherited a magical compass from an elderly neighbor and used it to uncover mysteries while finding his own path in life. As he sealed the envelope with his entry, he couldn't help but think of Mrs. Whitaker. The story was for her as much as it was for him. While waiting for the competition results, Liam explored the other items from the attics. The watercolors, though old, still produced vibrant hues. He experimented with painting landscapes inspired by the postcards from Italy, France, and Greece. Though he wasn't an artist by any professional standard, painting became another way for him to connect with Miss Whitaker's adventurous spirit. One day, while flipping through the collection of books she had left behind, he found one that stood out. It was titled Turning Dreams into Reality, a guide for young entrepreneurs. Inside, Mrs. Whitaker had scribbled notes in the margins. Little words of wisdom like always follow your passion, and the first step is believing you can. Inspired, Liam began brainstorming ways to use what he had learned. He decided to combine his newfound love of storytelling and art into a small business. Using his typewriter and watercolors, he created handmade greeting cards with short, inspiring stories written on them. Each card was unique, adorned with his illustrations of imagined landscapes or fantastical creatures. He shared a few of his creations with neighbors and classmates, and to his surprise, they were a hit. People loved the personal touch and the heartwarming stories. Soon, Liam set up a small table at the local farmer's market, selling his cards for a few dollars each. The money wasn't much at first, but he loved the process of connecting with people through his work. One Saturday morning, a woman approached his stall. She bought several cards and asked Liam about his inspiration. When he mentioned Mrs. Whitaker, the woman smiled warmly. "She was my aunt," she said. "It's wonderful to see how she's inspired you. She always believed in nurturing creativity." Hearing that Mrs. Whitaker's family appreciated his efforts gave Liam even more motivation to keep going. As the weeks passed, he noticed more people returning to his stall, eager to see his latest creations. He even received requests for custom cards, which he happily fulfilled. Then, one day, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the writing competition. Liam's hands trembled as he opened the envelope and read the first line. "Congratulations, Liam Harper. Your story, The Compass of Wonders, has won first place in our youth writing contest." He couldn't believe it. The scholarship money would be enough to buy better art supplies and even a newer typewriter or computer to expand his card-making business. But more than the financial reward, the recognition boosted Liam's confidence. He felt like he was finally stepping into the potential Mrs. Whitaker had seen in him. With the support of his parents, Liam used part of the prize money to invest in his small business. He purchased a professional printer and high-quality paper, allowing him to produce more cards efficiently while maintaining their handmade charm. The rest of the money went into a savings account his parents had set up for him, a reminder of the importance of planning for the future. By the time spring rolled around, Liam's little card business had grown significantly. Local shops began carrying his designs, and he even started an online store with the help of his dad. Each card still carried a small note at the bottom, inspired by the wisdom of Eleanor Whitaker. It was his way of keeping her memory alive, sharing her kindness and spirit with everyone who came across his work. Through it all, Liam knew that the greatest treasure Mrs. Whitaker had left him wasn't the money or the items in the attic. It was the belief that he could make a difference, that his creativity could brighten someone else's day. And in doing so, he discovered that his life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. The following summer, Liam's small card-making venture had blossomed into something much larger than he had ever anticipated. His online store was receiving orders from across the country, and local craft fairs were eager to feature him as a young entrepreneur. One day, while packing up a shipment of cards adorned with his latest watercolor creations, his mother walked into the room with a letter in her hand. "You've got another one," she said with a proud smile. Liam took the envelope, his curiosity piqued. Inside was a handwritten note from a woman named Clara Monroe, the owner of an upscale boutique in the city. She had discovered his cards at a nearby craft fair and was interested in partnering with him to sell exclusive designs in her shop. The proposal was unlike anything Liam had experienced. Clara wanted him to create a custom line of greeting cards featuring uplifting quotes paired with his art, and she offered to pay him a generous advance for the initial batch. "This could be big," Liam's father said as they discussed the offer over dinner, "but it'll also take a lot of effort. Are you ready for that?" Liam hesitated. The idea of working with a high-end boutique was exciting, but it also felt daunting. What if he couldn't deliver? What if his work wasn't good enough? Then he remembered Mrs. Whitaker's letter and her encouragement to embrace life's surprises. "I think I want to do it," Liam finally said, determination shining in his eyes. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Liam poured himself into designing the exclusive line for Clara's boutique. He experimented with vibrant watercolor techniques, drawing inspiration from the maps and postcards Miss Whitaker had left him. He carefully chose quotes that reflected themes of kindness, hope, and resilience values he had learned from her. When the collection was complete, Clara invited Liam and his family to visit her boutique for the launch. As they entered the shop, Liam couldn't help but marvel at the elegance of the place. His cards were displayed prominently near the entrance, framed by soft lighting that made the colors pop. Seeing his work in such a professional setting filled him with pride. The launch was a resounding success. Clara's customers loved the personal touch of Liam's designs, and many praised the stories behind the cards. Clara was so impressed that she extended the partnership, offering Liam a recurring spot in her shop. With the advance payment and a percentage of the profits, Liam found himself earning more money than he ever imagined at his age. But it wasn't just about the money. Liam had learned how to balance his passion with responsibility. He set aside a portion of his earnings for his education and donated another portion to a local charity that supported elderly residents in the community, honoring Mrs. Whitaker's memory. One day, as Liam was sketching new designs at his desk, his dad walked in holding a package. "This came for you," he said, placing it on the table. Liam opened it to find a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with notes and sketches in Miss Whitaker's handwriting. A letter accompanied the journal, written by her niece, who had discovered it while sorting through her belongings. The letter read, "Dear Liam, Aunt Eleanor always spoke so fondly of you. She told me how much joy you brought into her life and how she saw a spark in you that reminded her of her own adventurous spirit. While going through her things, I found this journal and thought you should have it. It's filled with ideas she had for projects she never got to pursue. Perhaps you'll find inspiration in her words, just as she found inspiration in your kindness." Flipping through the journal, Liam saw sketches of card designs, notes for potential short stories, and even plans for a community art project. The pages felt alive with her energy, and Liam couldn't help but smile. She had left him one last gift, a roadmap to keep chasing his dreams. He decided to bring one of her ideas to life. Inspired by her notes, Liam organized a community art event in Maplewood. He invited people of all ages to create their own greeting cards, providing supplies and guiding them through the process. The event was a hit, with families and neighbors coming together to share their creativity and stories. As Liam watched the room buzz with activity, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. It wasn't just about the success of his business or the financial rewards he had earned. It was about the connections he was building and the joy he was spreading, lessons he had learned from Mrs. Whitaker and carried forward in her honor. Years later, as Liam looked back on his journey, he often thought of the moment he first helped Mrs. Whitaker carry that bag of garden clippings. It had seemed like such a small act at the time, but it had set in motion a series of events that shaped his life in ways he never could have imagined. Her memory remained a guiding light, a reminder that kindness, creativity, and a willingness to embrace life's surprises could lead to the most extraordinary adventures. And in his heart, he knew that Mrs. Whitaker would be proud. As Liam grew older, his small act of kindness to Miss Whitaker became the foundation of an even greater legacy. The community art event he organized in her honor became an annual tradition in Maplewood. Over time, it evolved into the Whitaker Creativity Festival, a celebration of art, storytelling, and community spirit. Local businesses sponsored booths, artists showcased their work, and children painted murals on large canvas sheets that adorned the town square. It became one of Maplewood's most cherished events, drawing visitors from neighboring towns and cementing Liam's reputation as an inspiring young leader. By the time Liam was in high school, his business had grown into something much larger than he'd ever anticipated. His greeting cards were sold not just in Clara Monroe's boutique, but in dozens of shops across the state and through a thriving online store. What had once been a hobby had turned into a full-fledged business, one that supported him financially and opened countless doors. One day, as Liam sat in his home studio working on a new card design, his phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from a major publishing house that specialized in children's literature. They had come across his work and were impressed by his ability to blend art and storytelling. The email offered him an opportunity to illustrate and co-author a children's book about kindness and creativity. The idea thrilled Liam, but it also brought a wave of self-doubt. "Do I have what it takes to do something this big?" he confided to his parents one evening. His mother, always his biggest cheerleader, replied, "You've been sharing stories and art since you were 13, Liam. You've touched so many lives already. This is just the next step." Encouraged by their support, Liam accepted the offer. The publishing house paired him with a seasoned author, and together they began crafting a story inspired by Mrs. Whitaker's life and the lessons she had taught him. The book, titled The Garden of Wonders, followed a young boy who befriends an elderly neighbor and learns to see the magic in everyday life. It was a tribute to her wisdom, her adventurous spirit, and the way she had forever changed his path. The process was challenging but rewarding. Liam poured his heart into the illustrations, drawing from the landscapes and characters he had imagined while sifting through Mrs. Whitaker's postcards and maps. When the book was finally published, it became an instant hit, earning praise for its heartwarming message and stunning visuals. Schools began using it in their curriculums to teach students about the importance of empathy, creativity, and intergenerational friendships. The success of the book led to invitations to speak at schools and community events. Liam shared his story with children and teenagers, encouraging them to explore their passions and believe in the power of small acts of kindness. At one event, a young girl approached him with a drawing she had made. "This is my neighbor," she said shyly. "She's really old, but I think I'm going to ask if she wants to have tea with me." Liam smiled, feeling a wave of emotion. Mrs. Whitaker's legacy was continuing to ripple outward, touching lives he might never have reached on his own. As the years went by, Liam expanded his efforts. He used the proceeds from his book and business to establish the Whitaker Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting creative education and opportunities for young people. The foundation offered art supplies, workshops, and scholarships to kids who showed promise but lacked resources. Liam wanted every child to have the chance to dream as he had, to know that their talents could make a difference in the world. One of the foundation's most ambitious projects was the restoration of the old Victorian house that had once been Mrs. Whitaker's home. The house had fallen into disrepair after her passing, but Liam purchased it with the goal of transforming it into the Whitaker Creativity Center. The center would serve as a hub for art classes, writing workshops, and community gatherings, ensuring that her home continued to inspire others as it had inspired him. On the day of the center's grand opening, the entire town gathered to celebrate. The house had been beautifully restored, with its repair-on porch freshly painted and its gardens blooming with roses and lavender. Inside, the rooms were filled with art supplies, bookshelves, and exhibits showcasing the history of Miss Whitaker's life and the impact she had on the community. Liam stood on the porch, looking out at the crowd. His parents stood in the front row, beaming with pride. Clara Monroe was there, along with Miss Delgado and many of the neighbors who had supported him over the years. Even Mrs. Whitaker's niece had traveled from out of town to attend. As Liam stepped up to the microphone, he took a deep breath. "This house is more than a building," he began. "It's a testament to the power of kindness, creativity, and the connections we make with one another. Mrs. Whitaker showed me that even the smallest gesture is a shared story. A bag of garden clippings can lead to something extraordinary. I hope this center becomes a place where dreams take root and grow, just as mine did." The crowd erupted into applause, and Liam felt a sense of fulfillment that words couldn't capture. Mrs. Whitaker had changed his life, and now he was helping others find their own paths, just as she had once encouraged him to do. In the years that followed, the Whitaker Creativity Center became a cherished institution in Maplewood. Children who attended its programs went on to achieve incredible things, from publishing books to starting their own businesses. Many of them cited Liam and Mrs. Whitaker as their inspiration, proof that kindness and creativity could transform lives. And though Liam's journey continued to evolve, he never forgot the woman who had started it all. Every time he typed a story on his typewriter or painted a new design, he felt her presence, a gentle reminder that the world was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. Years later, as Liam sat in the sunlit study of the Whitaker Creativity Center, he reflected on how much his life had changed since the day he had first offered to help Mrs. Whitaker. The center was now bustling with activity. The walls were adorned with colorful artwork from children and adults alike, and the sound of laughter and creativity echoed throughout the house. Liam had become a figure of admiration not only in Maplewood but also beyond. He had published several more books, each one inspired by his own life experiences and the lessons he'd learned from Miss Whitaker. Yet, despite his success, he always remained grounded, never losing sight of the values she had instilled in him. One crisp autumn morning, as he was sorting through some of the older exhibits in the Creativity Center, Liam came across a dusty box he hadn't noticed before. It was tucked away in a corner of what used to be Miss Whitaker's bedroom, now transformed into a small reading nook. Curious, he opened it to find a collection of letters and photographs that hadn't been displayed with the other memorabilia. As he sifted through the contents, he found a letter addressed to him, dated years before Miss Whitaker's passing. His heart skipped a beat as he unfolded the delicate paper and began to read. "Dear Liam," the letter began. "If you're reading this, then it means you've continued to follow the path I always believed you would. I wrote this letter for a future I knew you were capable of creating, even if you didn't yet realize it yourself. Life is filled with choices, and the ones you've made to be kind, to dream, to share your gifts have led you here. But there's one more treasure I wanted you to find." Liam's curiosity deepened as he scanned the letter for clues. At the bottom, she had written, "Look beneath the floorboards of the attic. The world is full of surprises, my dear boy. This is one more for you." The attic had always been a special place for Liam, filled with the memories and belongings that had set his journey in motion. But he had never thought to look beneath the floorboards. That evening, after the center had closed for the day, he climbed the creaky stairs to the attic, armed with a flashlight and a sense of wonder. He knelt down and gently pried up one of the loose boards near the window. Beneath it, he found a small metal box. Inside was a key, an old map of Maplewood, and a short note that read, "Use this key at the chest in the garden shed. Adventure awaits." Liam couldn't help but laugh softly. Even in her absence, Mrs. Whitaker had a way of making him feel like a character in one of his own stories. He headed down to the garden shed, where an old wooden chest had sat undisturbed for years. With trembling hands, he inserted the key and lifted the lid. Inside, he found a collection of even more remarkable treasures. A beautifully illustrated journal filled with Mrs. Whitaker's dreams and unfulfilled aspirations. A small pouch containing gold coins, likely antiques from her travels abroad. A deed to a piece of land just outside Maplewood. The deed was the most surprising find. Attached to it was a note explaining that Mrs. Whitaker had purchased the land many years ago with the intention of creating a space where people could come together to learn, grow, and share their creativity. "I always dreamed of building a sanctuary for dreamers," she had written, "but I think this dream was meant for you to fulfill, dear Liam." Overwhelmed by the depth of her thoughtfulness, Liam made a silent promise to honor her wish. He began working with architects, landscapers, and the community to transform the land into what became known as the Whitaker Grove. The Grove was an open-air space filled with gardens, workshops, and performance areas where people could gather to celebrate art, music, and storytelling. The grand opening of the Whitaker Grove was a town-wide event complete with music, food, and activities for all ages. Standing before a crowd of hundreds, Liam spoke about the woman who had inspired it all. "Mrs. Whitaker taught me that kindness and imagination can change the world," he said. "This grove is her vision brought to life, a place where dreams can flourish, just as she helped mine to." The years that followed brought even greater blessings. The Whitaker Foundation expanded its reach, creating satellite programs in nearby towns and even funding scholarships for aspiring artists and writers across the country. Liam's books and artwork continued to inspire people of all ages, and his story became a testament to the power of compassion and creativity. One evening, after a particularly successful event at the Whitaker Grove, Liam sat alone under the stars. The grove was quiet now, the lanterns casting a soft glow over the garden paths. He thought about how far he had come from a boy who simply wanted to help his neighbor to a man whose life had been shaped by her belief in him. As he looked up at the night sky, he whispered, "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker." He could almost hear her voice in the rustling leaves, gentle and encouraging as always. "The world is full of surprises, Liam. Keep embracing them." And he did. For the rest of his life, Liam carried forward the lessons she had taught him, ensuring that her legacy of kindness and creativity would inspire generations to come. Years turned into decades, and Liam Harper's journey continued to evolve in ways that seemed to mirror the stories he had once crafted on Mrs. Whitaker's old typewriter. His life remained a testament to the belief that small acts of kindness could ripple outward, transforming not just one life, but an entire community and beyond. The Whitaker Grove grew into a destination for dreamers and creators from all over the country. Every summer, the Festival of Light and Story brought together artists, writers, and performers to share their talents under the open sky. Thousands attended each year, many drawn by the inspiring story of how the festival had begun with a simple act of helping a neighbor. The town of Maplewood thrived, with new businesses, galleries, and creative spaces opening, often inspired by the energy radiating from the Whitaker Creativity Center in the Grove. But Liam's influence reached far beyond Maplewood. The Whitaker Foundation launched programs across the globe, supporting underprivileged communities with resources for creativity and education. Mobile art studios traveled to rural areas, bringing painting, writing, and storytelling workshops to children who had never had access to such opportunities. Scholarships funded by the foundation helped countless young artists pursue their dreams, many of whom credited Liam's story for inspiring them to believe in themselves. Despite his growing fame, Liam remained grounded. He still spent time at the Creativity Center, mentoring children and leading workshops. He found joy in the smallest moments, whether it was helping a young boy paint his first watercolor landscape or listening to an elderly woman share her memories during a storytelling circle. One particularly memorable moment came when a young woman named Isabella arrived at the center. She had been awarded a Whitaker Foundation scholarship to attend art school and had traveled all the way to Maplewood to personally thank Liam. As she shared her story, Liam learned that she had grown up in a small town where resources were scarce, but a traveling workshop funded by the foundation had sparked her passion for art. "I always felt like I was invisible," Isabella said, tears in her eyes. "But your foundation showed me that my voice matters, that my art matters. I wouldn't be here without you." Liam was deeply moved. "It was Mrs. Whitaker's belief in me that started all of this," he said. "She taught me the power of nurturing someone's potential. Now it's my honor to pass that gift on to others." As the years went by, Liam wrote a memoir about his life, The Ripple of a Kindness. The book chronicled his journey from helping Mrs. Whitaker with her garden clippings to building a global movement rooted in creativity and compassion. It became a bestseller, translated into dozens of languages, and inspired countless readers to look for the small ways they could make a difference in the world. One winter evening, as snow gently blanketed Maplewood, Liam found himself alone in the attic of the Creativity Center. Now well into his 60s, he still felt the pull of this space, where his journey had truly begun. He sat down at Mrs. Whitaker's old typewriter, the keys now polished from years of use, and began typing a letter. "Dear Mrs. Whitaker," he wrote, "it's been a lifetime since you first welcomed me into your world. I've often wondered if you knew just how much you would change my life with your kindness, your stories, and your unwavering belief in me. You gave me the courage to dream and the tools to make those dreams a reality. Every step I've taken has been guided by the lessons you taught me." He paused, his fingers hovering over the keys. Then he continued. "Your wisdom has touched the lives of so many people, far beyond what either of us could have imagined. The world is brighter because of you. Thank you for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. Thank you for teaching me that kindness can change everything." Liam signed the letter and carefully placed it in a drawer with the other treasures he had collected over the years. He looked around the attic, now filled with artwork, books, and photographs from a lifetime of adventures and accomplishments. It was a living testament to Miss Whitaker's belief that the world was full of surprises for those brave enough to embrace them. As he descended the attic stairs, he heard the distant sound of laughter from the Creativity Center's main hall. A group of children was gathered for a storytelling workshop, their voices echoing with excitement. Liam smiled, his heart full. The legacy of Mrs. Whitaker, the woman who had once lived quietly in the Victorian house next door, had become a legacy shared by the world. Through her kindness, she had set in motion a journey that would inspire countless others to follow their own dreams and share their own light. And so, Liam Harper lived out his days as a beacon of creativity and compassion, always carrying the memory of Mrs. Whitaker in his heart. When he thought about her, it was with gratitude and wonder for the extraordinary gift she had given him, the belief that a single act of kindness could change everything.